Really, probably Bolivia, because I'm going to accommodate the Germans, but I'm going where Germans live and it's warmer. Either there. There's some talk of already running me for president there. Before being born, everyone lives in a very small space. Then, post-delivery, reside in a larger area. And those who prosper move into bigger and bigger dwellings, while in a non-standard expansion, a few go on to even smaller places. Though more precise would be a better description. Definition time. Literal thinking. Duct tape for simple minds. Sidebar. There is an undescribed manner by which you can personally define things to such an extent as to cause reality to assume anew a closer resemblance to life. Writings on the wall of a monastery's men's room. Knowing what's going on will make up for a lot, followed by the response, except for being here on this planet, and under that was a phone number and the message, Flo's back in town. The simple use fashion to compensate for originality of thought. Men invented the word stupidity to help cover over what they'd done after looking away in their initial eye contact with life. A large part of being ordinary is in taking the external to be of extreme, if not supreme, importance. You realize then in how few hands are left the responsibility for the internal. The simple use denials to keep from having to think about it in greater detail. Once man could speak and was thus able to say how harsh and impersonal he found life to be, one guy said, well, let's pretend it's actually like another person and change its name to God. And this alone made lots of them feel much better. The simple are hard-pressed to find much of a distinction between ignorance and anything proposed to replace it. One man says he has a mental rash. He says at least it's better than having the brain tumor he used to have. He says at least he thinks it's better. Some graffiti in the ladies' room of a certain mystical lodge. Discovering what's going on in this world before you die here is like having a space rocket poised on the launching pad with some part of you leaking the fuel. And the guy with the prior tumor says that hearing this makes him a bit more certain that he is in fact better. The simple have children to keep from having to become artists. An alternative progress of nature, an alternative progress of naming based on comprehension, going from not being able to call life anything, to calling it life, to calling it nature, to calling it God, to calling it physical laws, to calling it unlimited speculation, and beyond the temporal horizon, the few capable of thinking, don't call me, I'll call me. The simple find things to be either too complicated or else too straightforward to bother with. Today's checklist, short version. If other people's ideas can still annoy you, then originality of thought yet eludes you. Now today's literary feature and quiz. What's worse than a really, really bad piece of fiction? Tentative response. A good sound criticism thereof. Not bad, but don't stop yet. And now for today's neurological news. Why the hell do you think man has his brain split into two parts anyway? The simple will kill each other. The simple will kill each other rather than stay bored. Hell, the simple can kill you for trying to get them on board. Yeah. Some travel news. Thieves tend to stick close to home. And now for a late-breaking neurological update. One man has changed the names of the two sides of his brain from the left and right to the internal and external. Hey, don't look at me time. It's up to the simple to encourage one another. It is those not on the express who love to clamor about liberating themselves and jumping off the train. Some drawings in doo-doo on the walls of the kiddies' restroom. If you scratch away the surface of a dumb adult, underneath it you'll discover an even dumber one. Some penal news. Rehabilitating the simple is an extremely iffy proposition. One man once had this passing thought, that trying to make yourself more conscious is like the supreme test of whether you can be driven crazy or not. Laws and morality are made for the simple, and only they take them seriously, and only they cannot live by them, and only they suffer over the failure. And even then, they're just faking it. Interim simple update. No matter what you say about the simple, there's always something else to say. So onward, noble scout. Okay. The simple will continue to ride buses even when they hear planes overhead. Now a feature entitled, Why Men Have Difficulty Thinking Independently. Sheep don't like to be left alone. A viewer writes, why are some of the items read on your show given titles and some are not? I have thought about this much and feel sure there's some significance, so decide to just go ahead and ask you to explain it for me. Yours, etc. The simple will worship shadows rather than go in the next room and turn on a light. Men began composing songs about love, causing them to do crazy, unprofitable, irrational things once they realized that writing tunes about stupidity causing it wouldn't sell. The simple use reality to replace a direct confrontation with life. Unsigned note on the bulletin board in the library of one mystical college. All plagiarism has a single source, and if you discover it, your mind will be set free. Some say that undergraduates are given to hyperbole, but hey, some people still believe the world is round. Food and the less complex. Mentally, the simple will take whatever is being served. The reason ordinary people like to talk about their tragedies and pratfalls is because what's happened to them in life is usually the most exciting thing that's happened to them. The simple will not only answer to their name whenever it's called, but will in fact proudly stand up to do so. Okay, here's the possibility. You can leave your mind under the haphazard direction of your stomach, or you can bring it under your own conscious attention. Does that about cover it? Asked the passenger extending his ticket. That about does it, replied the smiling conductor. To themselves, the simple think, how hard can it be if I don't do it? Listening to yourself talk to yourself is a major cause of mental stickiness. Oh yeah, another thing about being simple is that you don't have to worry about protecting yourself. You can't. One day the royal priest went to see a certain stable hand who he had long suspected to be a mystic and asked him, is there something amiss with those who believe that the gods speak to them? And the one with facets of manure on his feet halted his shoveling long enough to reply, would a physicist worthy of his name find fault with the exploratory fumblings of children studying science? Fashion and the less complex. Definition of the ordinary. The simple and their Sunday best. Aphorism update. Literal to he who thinks literal. and otherwise for those who can do otherwise. The simple like heroes because they do all the work for them. The difference between knowing what's going on and ordinary knowledge. Life provided gem clips for those frightened by staples. The simple always submit to the meaner dog. If the more conscious did have an enemy, it would be the normal tempo of the march of progress. The simple use opinion instead of direct viewing. Those who don't know what they're talking about can always find vocal support. The simple will inherit the earth since they're everyone's ancestor. Codicil, only the self-made are exempt from this. But hark, the benefit of being simple. You don't have to be very smart to be so. Verse and the less complex. East is east and west is west, and the simple are every damn where. Note, only the more conscious are exempt from this, and are thus not any particular where. The secret is there, but men dismiss it as only air. Definition of a mystic: a man who's become so simple that they don't know what else to call him. Back to the examples that we were using, plucked from the splendid world of weaving and looms. No. Was it lacrosse? I was using some of the words for the last 2 nights that you find in all major religions and all of the assumed smaller mystical cells therein. The first one being someone approaching a mystic, a religious prophet, and etc., and saying that in their time and place they had followed all of the rituals and laws of whatever spiritual tract the area was given to, and ask some person, some assumed mystic, what they could do to increase the speed at which they might be moving, to increase the possibility they might have the experience of this new kingdom, this new condition. And these various figures have said, take everything that you have and go sell it, dispose of it, and give it to the poor. And last time, I brought in my translation, my interpretation of what could be considered also the central dogmatic core of all religions and all humanist philosophies, which is in fact the marching orders of civilization itself, that all the 10 Commandments, all of the mighty dictums from all religions amount to: do not take that which is not yours. And regardless of where I went with those 2 in the last couple of times, I was going to pull them sort of together. Having to do with the last one, if you recall, I was to the point of pointing out that do not take that which is not yours presents a very strange, from a more complex view, a very curious situation in that to think, and we're talking about, of course, the world of the intellect, the world of man's consciousness, not the world of his behavior, not the world of his survival instincts, that taking that which is not yours is the basis of all thinking, that a man's mind cannot get ignited without him being a thief. Or to quote a news item from last time, that to first think, life teaches, be a thief. There is no way out of that. You can argue, you can talk all you want to, but as you should be able to see from a certain fairly reasonable understanding of what I just said, or a presentation of it. I could get ordinary minds to easily agree to that, to the point of considering me probably to be stupid to point out something so obvious. That that's the whole point of education, that's the whole point of children perhaps staying, human children staying an inordinate, comparably speaking, an inordinate length of time in childhood with their family. That it's not just to teach them hunting skills like an eagle or a lion, or to teach them skills of stealth if they were a gazelle, but it has to do with the intellect, that children, human children, must have a prolonged childhood to be so instructed in the many things that must fill a man's mind, all the things that he intellectually needs. It is theft. Nothing wrong with it. It is what life itself teaches. It is the only way to get the intellect going. Then life turns around and tells men through their various institutions, and as I said, at a basic level of intellectual evolution itself, do not take that which is not yours. At the survival level, at the physical level, that is true for man now and will always be, as it is for all non-thinking creatures. To protect yourself, protect your family, protect the food you have, protect the place of refuge you have from the elements, and etc. And on that basis, you do not steal unless you're the meaner dog and your family is hungry, your pack is hungry. But intellectually, without men ordinarily interpreting it in the way that I have, that all the 10 Commandments, the whole idea of do not steal, is still functional, is point blank at the survival level, the physical level, that although man will steal, will take that which is not theirs to survive, life approves of it. If you're a human and can talk, of course, you disapprove of it if a meaner dog comes along and takes your food. But then perhaps you will starve and the meaner dog survives. But when it gets to the intellectual level, when it gets to any non-physical level, no matter what men are wont to call it ordinarily, life is also behind all these religious facades. The reality behind all of these myths is do not take that which is not yours. And so life with one hand is forcing men to ignite their intellect by theft, and then is subtly, it is certainly not any common presentation of religion or ideas of morality, but is subtly telling men do not take that which is not yours. There is nothing better fits the description of theft than man's intellect. There is absolutely no demand for any intellectual activity otherwise. Originality is not called for, it is not necessary, and it does not even seem to be desirable. Now it is on any major level. Civilization itself, intellectually, if you look out, that which passes for the artistic, that which passes for the, at any time and place, the contemporaneous intelligent, insightful, is all a matter of repetition. It is all a matter, in varying degrees, of plagiarism. What little in one man's lifetime, although it does increase, has been increasing, it is a form of cannibalism. For the parade, in a sense, to move in any way that is discernible, you've got to take the front rank, whatever it is, whatever area. We could be talking about morality, we could talk about physics, we could be talking about mathematics, the art world, the music world, theology, anything that is singular to the world of man, for it to apparently move even an inch. Let's say this whole parade of 6 billion people in this parade, the front rank to some degree has to begin chewing on the toes or the heels or the buttocks of those in the back rank. Or those of you that are getting fleet of mind, you could reverse it and say the ones in the back have got to begin to do it with the ones in front. It's according to how malleable your spatial perceptions are when you think. Those of you that still think literally, of course, think that such things as a Mobius strip is something that literally exists. Or you think that infinity is actually something. For the parade itself to apparently move, cannibalism must take place. And if you don't like must take place, all you have to do is just give a cursory reflection on what you know about history, what you know about current events. Current events just being an attempt to take some of the boredom out of history to make things appear that they're going faster. But you have got to be severely constricted in your own awareness if you can turn on the news today and think that it's any different than it was, let me slip up on you, last week, last month, 10 years ago. It does seem exciting if you're interested, if your hobby is current events, if you think that that is of great interest. All it says, if a man said that, and we were in the business of making objective critiques or observation of such a man, it is not a critique of current events in history and the general flow of human events. It would be, if anything, a critical observation of the man. If he says, boy, there's nothing as fascinating as world events. I mean, they just pop in all the time, but now such a man would probably have some sort of satellite dish and picking up whatever you can get, 200 or 300 channels and news channels from all over the world, and would sit there and really delight. I mean, it's a fine hobby. But if the man said, if he disagreed with what I said about the repetition of current events and how things move at a certain kind of pace that stretches the word tempo itself, if such a man observed, if he disagreed with what I said, oh no. And of course he could come up with personal anecdotes. He could come up with specific examples of how fast things change. And I can do it for him. Who would have thought the Berlin Wall would come down? Germany would be unified. Who would have thought that the USSR almost overnight would become, whatever it is, 20 different countries? I mean, he'd go, yeah, well, how dare you say that? It doesn't say anything about history or current events for such a man to disagree. It just shows what a severely limited awareness he has, because it's not true. And I'm not picking on the hobby. If that's your hobby, so be it. But if you think that anything interesting is happening, it just shows that your mind is totally devoid of any interest. Thieves tend to stick close to home. They will protect the territory, not physically. I mean, we're talking about intellectual territory now, internal territory. They will insist that things are, assuming that they are interested in the external world, which already is thrown in tonight. I gave you a little note that a major part of being ordinary is in taking the external to be of extreme, if not supreme, importance. That's just a walking around every day, good, solid definition of being simple, of being ordinary. To varying degrees, you take externals to be of supreme importance. And you cannot nail down an ordinary man's thinking in that regard, because if he was adroit enough on his feet, if you could be featly adroit, he could counter and bring up physical examples. But see, that's not what we're talking about. You ever notice sometimes there's certain kinds of trains can run along, and as bumpy and as unstable as they seem, if you just hesitate, like you get used to hearing the click of the wheels on the seams on the track, and if it just hesitates momentarily, you can be even lost more than you were. Which I know seems, before the fact, impossible. To say, watch it, because people say, no, it's not possible. What appears to be progress is not any abrupt change. People's mind, quite ordinary, educated, sane, civilized people, will say otherwise, such as examples I made. Just overnight, dramatic changes can take place. But to see that as being, in the intellectual world, some real change, to see that as being exciting and being of some great importance, it limits you, to say the very least. I'm not continuing to make continual jokes about simple and ordinary, but why not? Because there is no end to them. But they would say that you must keep up because every little change out there is of importance. For some of you, I think, tripped for a minute when I said it could be defended if an ordinary mind was at all capable of any verbal, intellectual juggling, they could say, they could start making examples of how important the external world is and why you should keep up, but they would resort back to the physical level, to the survival level, because out there it is. There's nothing more important to an animal than my old equation, if you remember, of I plus not I. If they had such an equation in the animal, the non-thinking world of creatures, the world of non-thinking creatures, the external is of extreme importance, damn near supreme importance. Because even without them being self-conscious, they wouldn't even be self without the external. And at the physical level, same with us. And so a mind can immediately say, well, the external world is of supreme importance. Anybody who would apparently take a shot at that is probably insane. It's probably suicidal because it's of supreme importance. Well, see, they got it twisted again. Because to even have to stop and say that shows that you're at least intellectually suicidal. And I say that figuratively speaking because intellectually it shows that you're so high up on a cliff that if you're going to commit suicide, we're going to have to change probably the laws of physiology, if not physics, so that a man could actually do himself terminal damage by leaping off of something less than an inch high. That the mind would say that the external world is of supreme importance. Yeah. Intellectually, to think that the external is of supreme importance is to stay a thief. It is to stay at home. And it is to be so confined in your awareness that any comment that things do not change to any worthwhile degree in a lifetime. Regardless of the fact that you turn right around and say, my God, a whole government fell. A nation of millions of people overnight fell into turmoil. There are two nations that were at peace yesterday encompassing millions of people, and there was no conflict in that area. This morning I wake up to the news, and now millions of new people are engaged in bloody combat. Do you not call that of importance? Well, sure, it's of physical, external importance, physically, and it's important to the people there, physically. And physically, it could eventually be of some significance to you. If you worked in a munitions factory, if you worked for a company that did a large amount of, or the majority of their business was done in the exporting area to one of these now belligerent parties, it might eventually impact you very severely. You could lose your job, etc. It could, but intellectually, to find that that's of importance, intellectually, do I have to keep intellectually? But we must give the ordinary their due again, the ordinary mind of everyone. A good, civilized, sophisticated man, again, I know sometimes I say this, and I don't know how fast all of you can listen. It's just an interesting sidebar. It's just to hit a car as we go by it. It's just parked there, but they're everywhere. Life just leaves them continually abandoned. That here it is, the very kind of people that should find this interesting, more physical people, less intellectual people, they're the ones that got the least interest in this. The beer drinker down in Gulfport, down a carpenter's bar, he would find this idea about some two countries now in a new stage of belligerency that were not yesterday, and it's only of what I'm getting to is over there, or even to the person here, it will only be of significance at all physically, that external event. And so the kind of people that are physically driven, or primarily physical, my bricklayer over here, my carpenter, they find of less interest than you would. Let's move back up to the University of Oregon and our man in the philosophy department there at the fine university. Almost no physical life. He's almost a walking intellect. He finds it of importance. And he would be the very one that would jump into what I just said and say, wait a minute, you can't say that belligerency, that warfare, on the other side of the world between two peoples, two groups, you can't say that that just has an external, that is physical, bearing on the rest of us. Nay, you're wrong. It has an intellectual bearing. And he could, don't make me do it, you can do it. He could come out probably as fast as he could talk, or if not, I'd give him lessons if I had time. He could just start describing how we should all be concerned, how it will have an impact, not just financially on whether you work for someone who is furnishing munitions to one of the warring factions, or whether you're engaged in employment with somebody who had been doing export business with one of them that could affect you adversely or positively. In the pocketbook? Yeah. But I tell the guy, the professor of philosophy, I said external. That is physical. Yeah. What's that got to do with you intellectually? And he would think, oh boy, he'd think, I am dealing with a very low-class, uneducated, unsophisticated person. And then he could start describing how world affairs, that kind of tension, that kind of lack of peace and prosperity, not just physically affects us all on the other side of the world, but certainly here. How can I say that has no effect? How can I say that's of no importance to a man intellectually? Well, of course, he'd got me, and I would feel chagrined as all get out. Well, I'd feel stupid for having wasted a minute talking to such a person. That was our inside joke for the night. Very funny. Now I'm back asking you, intellectually, notwithstanding the hobby. If your hobby is world events, great. It's as good a hobby as collecting 2x4s from all around the world. Collecting girder memorabilia. It's a good... For those of you that hang at that nudie bar, that's girder, not garter memorabilia. But intellectually, besides the hobby, intellectually, that is your consciousness. If we're talking to someone now who is interested in trying to get over this level, people who would like to actually launch off into space even while they're alive, internal space. Of what importance is that? And the answer, I can keep going, why? It's none. And that's not my opinion. There's nothing to prove. And anyone who says, well, you're an idiot. I agree. I'm an idiot. I shouldn't have been saying it. But the rest of you. To believe, to operate on the basis, to let your mind be continually run in that manner, puts you subject to one, I'll repeat again tonight, that says, here's the possibilities. You can let your mind be directed by the haphazard actions of your stomach. Or, oh, by the way, I didn't preface this. This is not allegorical for those of you keeping track. The possibility is you can either let your mind be driven by the haphazardness, in the haphazard manner, or under the haphazard control of your stomach, or you can bring your own mind under your own conscious awareness. That's it. That's the beginning and the end of ordinary life. That's the beginning and the end of all attempts at extraordinary life. Not external life, not physical life, but an internal life. But ordinary men, ordinary minds, find the external to be of supreme, ultimately, of supreme importance. But that is simply a de facto proof of their simplicity of mind, of how ordinary they are. And they can argue it forever, and you've got to submit. You've got to give in, because as soon as somebody goes, wait a minute. Of course, as soon as anybody says, wait a minute, you ought to get out of there. If you were trying to talk to them in any manner out of the ordinary, anybody goes, wait a minute. Say, okay, I'll be right back, and get the hell out. To insinuate, much less state first class, outright, that the external is of no use, no importance, no significance whatsoever. Let me just make it real crude. If I said a mystic has, a man with a more conscious person does not find the external world to be of any importance. That's just on its surface, charitably speaking, insane to tell that to an ordinary person. Because as I said, if nothing else, they will always immediately pick out the physical. And so you're an idiot. What's more important than food and health? And all they're saying is what's more important than being alive? Nothing. Case closed. What you're going to talk about, unless your hobby is palaver. Unless your hobby is just babble. Unless you're simple. And remember, the simple either see life as being too complicated or else too simple to even bother with. And we're right in the area. Which one is that, doctor? And the doctor said, exactly. You remember Dr. Enigma? By the way, I should have been truthful. Last time I read one of the news articles, if everyone caught it, there was another doctor, obviously some sort of columnist or offering advice, and his name, it was a proper name. It said the doctor who knows everything. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that? I should have pointed it out, I guess. That was actually Dr. Enigma under one of his pseudonyms. I just wanted to point that out. But you cannot in any way get an ordinary mind to consider the fact that the external is of no importance, no significance. Pick out, I can keep looking for synonyms. If you are attempting to understand what life's about, if you are absolutely determined to find out what's going on, the external will not help. There's no useful information. There's nothing going on out there. As always, to be absolutely truthful, there is. It's worth about 30 or 40 seconds. Now, if you can't do that, just go on past it, like they used to tell you back when you're taking a test. That you only got 2 hours. And if you get to a question and you can't answer it within like 15 seconds, or if you go on, go to the next one, and go back to it if you have time. I noticed that they never have the test givers and those who offer such instructions, they're never joined there in person with someone with a degree in the mortuary sciences. That is, someone who owns and operates a fine cemetery. Go back to it if you have time. Right, teach. Gotcha. Someone attempting to find, someone who is just determined to find out what's going on, the external world offers, as I said, after 30 or 40 seconds, offers nothing of interest. Is why I keep using it for examples, because it's the only thing that's left. If you ever get past that, then the idea that I presented the interpretation of the supreme theft being intellectual, being neural as opposed to physical, for someone attempting to do something extraordinary, that is the supreme theft. But it is the form of thievery that the ordinary mind cannot escape from. It can't resist. And as I assume I've established, if you were listening, it can't really even hear the proposition. It can't even hear the idea itself, because it would find, if it would accept my term of the ordinary intellectual life of an ordinary man being one of thievery, they would, if they say, well, you perhaps speak sometimes in allegory, and I went, oh, okay. They go, well, yeah, I can understand that. In the Western world, in fact, there's a version in the Eastern world, a great one, that says, we stand on the shoulders of the giants who've gone before. Thievery. Everybody's a second story man. You understand? The phrase being a man engaged in sham humility, because if you don't know, they're considering giving out Pulitzer Prizes now, not only in specific fields, but additional little prizes of addition. I think it's another 10% on top of whatever they get now, $200,000 for chemistry or whatever, is another 10% on top of that, if you can, when you are presented your award or when you first hear about it, if you can produce the right kind of sincere, fake humility about it. But the phrase has to do with someone that they give a man credit. You've got to be the colossus intellectually of our age in this field, and whatever it is, math or whatever, and a man. Well, scientists not real good at it, but you kind of hem and haw and you go, ah, shucks. And if you can get back in your kind of intellectual mode, you say such things, or it has been said, this kind of humility, and it's giving credit to the past, and that's sudden you say, well, I guess we do live in a day that is of great scientific or great mathematical strides and whatever. But remember this, we are only here today because we stand on the shoulders of the giants who've gone before. Second story men have to climb something. You know what a second story is? It's a man who burgles. He's a thief. You've got to stand on something to get up to the window and pilfer. To say that we stand on the shoulders who've gone before at the ordinary level is quite acceptable. It's just neither here nor there. But it is a blanket, unrecognized admission of the theft involved. It is also an admission, as I said, that you do not stand on the shoulders of giants that are unrecognizable. Thus you have it that the progress, if there appears to be any, in the general parade is inch by inch. It only comes at the expense of chewing on somebody else's buttocks, on their heels. You have, and those of you whose mind is really getting a bit freer spatially in the way you think, it's the front rank of the parade chewing on the heels of those in the rank that doesn't yet exist. No. Which brings about the temporal idea of the future and the present, when, if your mind really expands, the future is now. But it still only moves a little bit. It cannot be what appears to be original breakthroughs in, and fill in a blank, art, literature, science. It is not major breakthroughs. They do not stand on the shoulders, whatever seems to be in whatever field you pick out, of whatever intellectual activity. No matter how dramatic the rest of them involved, and the critics involved, and the observers, no matter to what degree they describe it as being a true, discrete step forward, or as they like to say nowadays, an actual quantum leap. No matter how they describe it, it is not really that. And no matter if they say we stand in this new day of physics, new day of painting, of art, music, we are where we are today only, thank God. And then they point toward the past, at least intellectually, because we here today, no matter what we have seemed to have accomplished, we're here only by the grace of the fact that we stand on the shoulders of giants who've gone before. They do not stand on the shoulders of giant aliens. They do not stand on the shoulders and say, well, here I am, here is the new explanation of how life works. And you describe it. If people listening, sane, ordinary ears listen, and they think, well, I recognize the language. Well, assume they're Danish like us, and they realize, well, I recognize the language. But what in the goddamn hell is he saying? And if I tried to allude periodically through my little short speech about that this is simply a new version, an updating of that which has gone before and that which men have thought about and speculated upon, but now I'm bringing it right up to date and putting the flesh and the muscles there on these skeletons, these theories of the past, and I'm bringing it right to date. Someone out there would go, he's trying to insinuate that what he's doing, that he's attributing, that he's also standing on the shoulders of intellectual giants who've gone before. Somebody else go, he's not standing on the shoulders of any giant that ever walked on this planet. He's standing on the shoulders, if he is at all, of aliens. Back to this way again. You can't be too original. Now, we've been through that, and I can make everyone see that fairly easily. I can make ordinary people just realize that my little joke about speaking Danish, which is kind of funny. I was sitting here in Italy. But no matter what the language is, the idea that you can't be too original, everyone understands that. Because any sentence, if right now you tried to, if I challenge somebody, say something absolutely original. And a person seemed to be kind of sharp. If they actually tried, the closest they could get to saying something original would be gibberish in your language, double talk. And that would be the closest they could come to being original. In fact, I could say, you're right, that's original. Even I, as weird as I am, I have never thought that sentence. It's not just gibberish. They could just say, carpets roll up moons when stars begin to fast in such a way, weight loss is inevitable in your head, mama, hair. Just, in other words, something like, and you go, all right, even I've never thought about that, so I'll give you this. That is original. There is an idea that no one, I agree with you, that no one has ever thought of. But then the question is, the conclusion is, so what? Because it is pure gibberish. Now you're left with, if you were still an ordinary mind and you were following this, you could go, well, big deal. So that's all you're saying. They could accuse me. All you're saying is that you can't actually be original, and then they might try to attribute it to the limitation of language. They could try to attribute it to almost anything. But you see, you're back to simple minds. They will either find all of life either too complicated or else, whatever you're pointing out, too simple to even fool with. And if you want to write the doctor and say, well, which one is it in this case? The ordinary mind has got to, if they were following this and trying to respond to it, they would have to dismiss it in some way. I mean, denial is part of being simple. The simple use denials to keep from having to think about it anymore. It was a news item, so it must be true. There is no such thing that can be ordinarily discussed, that can be put into words. There's no such thing that would fit that description that would be neurally original. It is all to varying degrees. To go back to my ordinary person I was talking to after we did the gibberish sentence, everything to varying degrees, I can make him go, yeah, is some form of plagiarism. And he'd go, oh, all right. At least it's plagiarism, if nothing else. Here, well, over there where they speak English, like you said, we're all plagiarizing in a sense Dr. Johnson. As soon as we established a language and made it, we solidified it in some way, systematized it, then we all say, oh yeah, anything you say, in a sense, is plagiarized because somebody said the words before. That's just a cheap man's way out who's on a train and he does not have a ticket. And every time the conductor comes around, if they don't shoot him or begin to kick him in the shins, they deny. Oh, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not here on the train. Sometimes it can be tricky switching metaphors while on a train in the middle of a stream. I mean, it's one thing to try and switch trains in the middle of a stream. I grant you that's tricky. That's been well established long before us. But then inside the train, to try and switch metaphors inside the train, and the train's trying to switch the train while in the middle of the stream, that's when you end up with very dazed ticket takers and passengers. But I mean, that's so obvious we won't even bother to stop and work with that one. I was going to put together for you the directive that is so common in religions and even in the publicly recorded and recognized mystical systems and attempts to do some form of extraordinary work on oneself. The directive that to increase the opportunity would be to take everything you have and give it away. And then tied to that all religions, the core of civilization itself, again we're speaking mentally, remember, is do not take that which is not yours. From a more conscious view, speaking, having nothing to do with survival and having nothing to do directly with the body and the external world, what one thinks ordinarily is the paramount example of ill-gotten gains. What better to do with such than dispose of it? Give it to the poor and needy. More specific, give it back to the poor and needy, which is just another word for the collective. The parade, the collective, life itself dealt you this hand. Life itself produced this edifice and enticed you to get an imaginary ladder and to climb up and become a second-story man, a burglar, a thief. Even gave you perhaps very likely, a degree when you got through doing it, and says you are now a doctor, or at least a master, or at least a bachelor, or at least a high school graduate. But once you see it for what it is, everything that the mind thinks, did you say everything? Are we back to wondering, does no one here speak Slavic? And did I change languages? Everything you think ordinarily just saves a whole lot of sweat and looking and effort. Everything that the mind ordinarily thinks is ill-gotten gains because it was a form of theft necessary but it is a form of theft, and the quicker you see it, the quicker you can move around the train. The quicker, in fact, you understand if the train's running 50 miles an hour and you start jogging toward the front, hey, can't hurt. To recognize that everything you got is up here is ill-gotten gains. It just is. Then what to do with it? Once you understand that, then you understand the idea of some religious prophet, some figure, shadowy figure in the history of man's civilization and apparent mystical travels of somebody somewhere saying, hey, here's the way to really increase the speed, to increase the opportunity, is take everything you've got and give it to the poor. Just get rid of it. And of course, simple people, which includes, again, way over 99 and a good percentage, 99 point, I won't say what, of the world's population. They go, oh, come on, Jesus. I'd give 10%, I'd give part of my salary. See. Again, life's arranged. We just hit a car going by again, if you like it. See, it's arranged in such a way that ordinary people can not only resist seeing the reality behind the myth. That is my interpretation. Not only can they resist seeing it, they don't have to just resist seeing it because they apparently are living by it. Simultaneously, that is, they say, oh, I don't have to give it. Come on, now, I'm not going to give everything away because right here, our religion, our founder, our king, our king, if you weren't religious, he only wants half of our crops every year. Our church, I give 10%, and then I give at least, look at my tax return, I give at least 5% on top of that to charities. You understand? That they don't see, they cannot acknowledge their mind is not hungry, complex. Their mind is not at the forefront of the general parade sufficient for them to be able to recognize the reality behind the myth of give everything away, right? Well, I'm trying to go back to the car we just hit because I don't think most of you got it. We just sideswiped it. They can't see, the mind, they're not capable of seeing that this doesn't have anything to do with physical possessions. This is all internal. To say, take everything you've got and give it away, and you'll increase the chances and the speed at which you might become more conscious. They cannot see that does not have to do with physical possessions. But since they can't see it, and that is reality, then you've got the possibility of somewhat of a disquieting situation. So life arranges for the fact to let them go ahead and do physically that which is not physical to begin with, and then be able to explain or to deny that they denied it, to be able to explain why they can't see it. Do you follow that? So that's the pleasure of just sideswiping cars. I mean, they're everywhere. That's why mystics don't have, I forget what they call it, but in Protestant religion, well, hell, in all religions, they got these huge courses, or concordances or something, whole courses that people buy, ministers, rabbis, to help them every week come up with a sermon, something to talk about. That's why mystics, you save all kinds of money. You got nothing to buy. You stick your head out the door or just stick your head in your brain and go, Jesus. Yeah. You just have to finally cut it off. I'm glad the tape doesn't run any more than this. And somebody one time asked about how long it took to write the news out, and that's not the problem. It's I just get to the point and I think, well, that's enough, and I just have to stop and get up and walk away from the typewriter. And it's not like, which of course doesn't sound good, I don't guess. But that brings us back to, I've already pointed out the truth that those who come after a mystic as so-called disciples and etc., part of their job, part of their responsibility after he dies is to make his life sound like it was more interesting than it actually was, more complex and trying and all that. Because it doesn't sound right to say, boy, I bet it's hard to come up with stuff like that. Well, you just have to kind of count the pages and think, well, it's going to take up 15 minutes, I'll stop here. You have to turn off the typewriter and pack them all up, put a rubber band around them, and bring them out. One more time before do you see that the ordinary mind, not out there, but your own ordinary mind, would have never translated, or it's not the common way, to take the idea, if it was insisted that you should give. If you're the one to get somewhere, don't waste your time going to a monastery and all that a Buddha, a Jesus, a Abraham, or somebody tells this guy, if you're that interested, take everything you own and give it away. Now, I know you've done everything else, but you asked me, and I'm telling you, take everything you got and give it away. And people think, oh, damn. And they take it immediately. Nobody ever thinks that means anything other than physical possessions. But it doesn't. But in a sense, I shouldn't say people know it, because then you start thinking man has a subconscious mind. And how can you think he has a subconscious mind when he just damn near has anything resembling but you knew the punchline. Life, of course, knows what it's saying and doing, but it does not let men see in general, because it's too far ahead. It's out of step with the general parade. To see that the idea of give everything away, take everything you own, if you really want to get somewhere, you want to move a little bit in the future, you want to get out of the general population of the parade, the tempo just goes on and on and on, and you can't get them going. You can jump up and down and try to get a fancy hat and be a drum major or perhaps a pope, and you come on everybody, let's go, and they still go. It marches at one speed. I mean, you might as well. You remember the guy that whined and everything went wrong, buttons fell off his shirt and they couldn't get the rattle fixed in his door, and he's been whining to his mother and then his wife, and he'd come in complaining, finally, Doris, they have raised the price now, beer $1. And she set him down, pulled him up the kitchen table, held his hands, and looked him in the eye and said, Frank, you're just going to have to face it. Life sucks. That's you got to finally get over it. That the parade goes, and you can scream, you can holler, you can bitch, you can whine, you can plead. And it goes like that. So, if a man was really in a hurry, and he found somebody he thought that maybe was out of step, was somewhere out there, somewhere else, and asked him how, and he says, take everything you own and give it away. It would never strike them that it means anything other than physical. And yet, they will explain not being able to understand it by saying, wait a minute, I already give 10%. You understand? But they give 10% of that which is not under discussion. And so therefore, it's like anytime a man's liable, I'll make it crude, anytime a man's liable to accidentally see something, life provides the fact, it gives him a hand and a finger. So you think that's just for purposes I won't go into, other purposes. But it's also in case he starts seeing that some chance he's about to see too much, so he can go, oh no, no. Take everything you own and give it away. Oh hell, come on, I've already give 10% of my, every year I give away 15%. That's not what I'm talking about. And then they think, well shit, you're crazy. I just told you I'd give it away. That's so they don't have to realize that I'm giving away that which they're not talking about. It's ill-gotten gains. What better to do with it than to give it away to the poor and needy, which pointing out is actually, you should say, give it back. Take it back to where you got it. Who is more poor and needy than ordinary minds? Who is more poor and needy than the parade itself? Who needs that kind of manure? Who needs that kind of recycled food? The general population of the parade. More specifically, as I said, if you can see it, it's like giving in to all of your opponents intellectually. And then once you understand that, opponents out there are nothing. Your right brain and left brain have been battling it out all these years. Tell them both, hey guys, face up to it. Life sucks. Give in. And let the right brain give away everything it owns to the left brain. Let the left brain take all of its possessions and give it to the right brain. And tell them both, say, hey, that other guy, talk about poor and needy. We're not talking about possessions, because up here they don't have possessions. It's all neural energy. So you don't have to explain it to them. That's metaphorical. Everything up there is metaphorical. That's what reality is. You tell one of them, take everything that you think and give it to the other guy. Give in. And then you tell the other guy, hey, give in to the other guy. Trust me. It'll be good for you. That would be the true poverty that is so often spoken of. That would be taking all the ill-gotten gains that you have up here. And ill-gotten gains is actually being too charitable. That's nonsense. It has nothing to do with being more conscious. And it's about time you set yourself down, held your little hands between yours, and say, Frank, you're just going to have to face it. Life sucks. That is, all this is just bullshit. Just face it. I knew that story would come in handy. I didn't give a whole lot of details, but I assume you picture it said first his mother, then his wife. So aren't you picturing like some guy 50, and he's still whining that a button fell off my shirt. Oh, he's whining. It's a lot. And she finally sits him down. Imagine a 50-year-old man, a 50-year-old left side of the brain, and the other side. So you're just going to have to face it. Like all these years, it's about time life sucks. Everything you got is ill-gotten. You can't ever get a shirt that the button won't fall off. You can't ever get a car that will not have a rattle in the door. And you cannot ever get a car that won't have a rattle in the door that they can't fix the rattle. And you'll never pick out any beer. You can keep going, you know, from imports down to the cheapest fishing beer they got, and they will still raise the price. Everything you think is ill-gotten. Everything you think is still recycled plagiarism, cannibalism from the general population of the parade. And it's got nothing to do with knowing what's going on.